everybody. This is Robert Band, your business finance expert. I'm introducing you today to Bruce Turkel. A lot of you know him, some of you don't, but Bruce is a renowned branding and marketing expert and now professional speaker. He's had a ad agency in Miami for many years, which he sold, and has migrated to a new business over the last 20 years in professional speaking. He's a dynamic speaker, and I want my audience to know him and for him to share his insight as it relates to marketing and life and business with you all. So we're going to get right into it. Bruce, you're one of the most well-rounded people that I've ever met. You were an advertising executive. You started your own firm. You sold it. You play harmonica. You play trumpet. You're in a local band. You're a voracious reader. You're an incredible writer. And you are a professional speaker. And you eat healthy and you exercise. What kind of kid were you growing up in Miami Beach? Were you athletic? Were you a reader? Music? How'd you spend most of your time?
Well, I was not athletic, and I have a feeling that had a lot to do with how the rest of my life sort of unfolded. Because when I was a kid, sports was the one thing that mattered. That's what everybody did. I wasn't particularly good at it, but I was a reader. I love to read. I still do. I used to spend a lot of time outside. One of the great things about growing up on Miami Beach is that I really grew up in what you might remember as the Flipper movie. I mean, we were on the water every day, swimming, diving, fishing, boating. We had little rafts and little old sailboats and whatever we could get our hands on. I spent a lot of time outside. In junior high school, I started playing music. So after that, I always played in bands. I always had a lot of fun doing that. I think mostly I was a pretty rambunctious, active kid. I was probably nice and polite and all of that, but I had a great time. I had a very, very independent and fun childhood.
Well, I know you're a voracious reader, and you are never idle because I've spent weekends with you, and I know you well enough over the years. Um, did you know right away when you went to University of Florida that you were going to major in advertising?
No, I had no idea. I think it was design that I finally graduated with a degree in design. I think that was my fifth major. I think I started by majoring in business because I thought, that was the right thing to do, except that I really didn't like it. And I think I had majored in English literature, which I liked because I love to read, but I didn't really see any future in that, and on and on and on. And one day my dad came up. He had some business in town, and he was visiting me, and we went out to dinner. And he said, "How do you like college?" I said, "Oh my goodness, I love college. I love my classes. I'm playing in bands. I'm meeting a lot of girls." He goes, "Yeah, that's great, but really, what I want to know is, how do you like school? How are your grades? How are you're preparing for a career?" And I said, "I don't really like it very much. I don't understand accounting. I don't enjoy it." My father said, "Well, what do you want to study?" I said, "I want to study art and design." He said, "Then why are you studying business?" And I said, "Well, I don't want to be a starving artist." And my dad said, "If you love what you do for a living, there's going to be days when you hate going to work. But if you start out that equation with hating what you do for a living, boy, oh boy, your life is just going to be a drudgery. Why don't you study what you love and you'll figure it out?" So I applied to the design school. It turns out I had to stay an extra year because I had to do all these prerequisites. Luckily, I could draw. I was always drawing from when I was a little kid, so that helped me a lot. And then I did. I loved it. I loved being there. I loved studying it. And the advertising and all of that came later once I wanted to understand the business ends of design. But it really was an iterative process, and I owe it to my father that I did what I should have been doing all along.
Well, I know you come from an entrepreneurial family. In fact, I remember growing up in Miami, your dad had the Orange Bowl, which were little restaurants in the malls, and then had some other nice restaurants and became a philanthropist. So, tell us about your dad and your mom and what they taught you, because you grew up in a business family, and what they taught you both about business and what you took from them personally and how you're like each of them.
My parents were both from New York. My mother was born in Brooklyn and grew up in Queens. My dad was born in the Bronx. As he says, there's only two places in the world that start with the Vatican and the Bronx. By the way, there's also the Bahamas and the Hague and a lot more, but he didn't include those. And he was stationed in Miami in the Air Force. He enlisted in the Air Force, and then he went back to New York. and he met my mother, and they moved to Miami Beach, and that's where I was born. And my dad was a builder. He, not because he wanted to be, he worked for a builder. And at some point, apparently, he started his own general contracting firm. He got his license. And my dad invented the concept of condominiums. My dad built the first condominium in the United States. He was doing it in Miami Beach. There was a guy doing it in California. My dad got the first CO. He was called by the Miami Herald the Condo King. And then my dad invented the idea of the office condo, and he built the first one. It's still in Coral Gables. I pass the building all the time. And that was his concept. But then there was a building moratorium on Miami Beach, and my grandfather, his father-in-law, had moved down. So he and my dad started a fruit shipping business, which ultimately became the Orange Bowls. They were in malls, orange juice, frozen orange juice, pizza, hot dogs. He went into that business. But the other thing that my father and my mother both did was they were very involved in the civil rights movement. My dad and my mom hosted, sponsored, set up the first sit-ins in the South. If you go to the Smithsonian, they say it's Greensboro, North Carolina in 1960 or 61, but in fact, it was in Miami in 1959. We have the articles, and my parents were very involved in the civil rights movement, in the inner city, and in the different things that were going on. And my dad did that till the end of his life. My mother continues to do those things. So around the dinner table, we really talked about two things. We talked about business because my dad was an entrepreneur. My mother worked in some of my dad's businesses as well. It was their businesses, really. And we also talked about civil rights. We also talked about doing the right thing. We also talked about what they were doing to make change in the world. It was a really very, very interesting dinner table. My parents' friends, the people who would come in from around the country to work on these different projects, were fascinating people. And again, it was a great, great learning experience growing up.
And so what business lessons did you learn from him? Because you then launched your own ad agency a couple of years out of college. We'll talk about that in a second. But what did you ingest business-wise that helped you in your business?
You know, it's interesting how role models tend to create, change, mold who you are. And they say about parenting that your kids don't listen to what you say. They listen to what you do, right? They watch your behavior. You could tell your kids anything you want, but they watch and they model your behavior. Well, my dad and my mother were both entrepreneurs, both in their business life and also in their private life, setting up all these different organizations. So that's what I saw. I saw the way they did it. I saw how business was just part of life, you know, how we'd go visit stores on weekends. We would go to different places around the community, travel. We would visit shopping centers because my dad's stores were all in shopping centers. My dad's joke was that he wanted to be able to go to an airport when you used to actually buy tickets at the counter. And if the woman behind the counter said, "Where do you want to go?" my dad would say, "I don't care, I have a store there." But every family vacation, we went and we looked at shopping centers and we went and we looked at restaurants. I really learned how what you do becomes who you are. In our family, it wasn't a job. It wasn't a career. It was who we were, it was what we did. My brother, sister, and I all worked in the restaurants. We used to visit the restaurants out of town. When I was in college, there was an Orange Bowl in town. I used to work there. It was just part of our life. And
by the way, Orange Bowl doesn't mean the Orange Bowl Stadium. Orange Bowl was his dad's retail restaurant.
Actually, the Orange Bowl Stadium sued my dad at one point for the trademark. Of course, the Orange Bowl restaurant started long before the stadium was named the stadium. So he sent them a letter back saying that out of the goodness of his heart and because he was a Miami Dolphins fan, he would allow them to continue to use the name.
and for anybody in Miami a long time, you'll remember they served an orange drink called the Orange Julius.
No. That was the competition.
Oh.
It was an Oh Joy. Oh Joy. You're lucky my dad's not here to hear that.
Okay.
Those would be fighting words.
Erase that. You graduated UF. We went to UF together, and then
University of Florida. Go Gators.
University of Florida, and then you worked at some agency for a couple of years. And did you always expect to launch your own ad agency?
You know, I don't really have an answer for that. I did because of my upbringing. You owned a business. That's what you did. I mean, that's what my dad did. That's what my mom did. Most of my friends' parents were entrepreneurs. That's kind of what you did. So I didn't really see any other way of doing it. When I got out of school, I worked in New York for a year at an agency, came back to Miami, worked in a couple agencies. And I remember telling my dad that I was going to start a business, and he didn't think it was a good idea. There was a recession at the time. He thought I needed to learn more. But the story he told me was, I don't remember this. I came to him a second time. I said, okay, Dad, I'm going to do it. And he told me, no, it's not the time. You shouldn't do it now. You should wait. He said, and then the third time you came to me and told me you did it. You quit your job and you started the business. My father called it the confidence of ignorance. And I think it was actually true. I didn't know how to run a business. I didn't know anything about it. Remember, I hated business school. It's kind of silly that I would want to run a business when I hated business school. And I loved art school, and I loved design school, and I loved music school. But that's what I did.
Well, I remember a year into it. First of all, I set up your books.
You did.
And we talked maybe about a year after business was coming in about partnering. And I think I was about to be off into other things. And anyway, you went on to build it. What part of the ad business stimulated you most? Was it sales? Was it the creative? Was it the finance? No, I know it wasn't the finance, but what was it?
Well, originally it was the work. It was doing the work, the design, the copywriting, the creative. The creativity was always my thing. That's what I loved. I loved doing the work. I loved solving the problems. I loved hiring the photographers, working with the models, working with the typesetters, working with the retouchers. The work. We used to have an ad for the agency, and it just simply said the work, the work, the work. That's what mattered. But what I realized early on was that if I didn't have clients, I didn't get the opportunity to do the work. So I had to learn how to actually go out and pitch clients, how to demonstrate to them that their lives would be better, their businesses would be better if in fact they hired us, and then how to manage that process, something else that I didn't have a lot of interest in. But you know what? If you don't get the business, you don't get the chance to do the work. And if you want to do the work, then the natural gate is to get through the client. And so that's what I really started to focus on. How do I find clients? How do I convince clients to hire us? How do I demonstrate to clients the value of what we're giving them, selling them? And then how do I get those clients to try new things, to spend more money, to engage us to do more projects? Because that's where the business comes from, and that's how I paid the costs of actually running this business.
Did you ever use like the financial data in running your business? Or I know that you sort of anything related to the financials is like gives you chills. But did you get into the financial part of the business?
Understand
I know you had a partner, but
yeah, at some point, that's right. I brought in a partner who was the ops guy, and he did all of that. The financials don't give me the chills. It's accounting orthodoxy that I can't deal with. But no. The money part of it, I enjoyed that very much. I enjoyed keeping track of it. I liked what I could buy with it. I didn't have a problem with that. And I liked demonstrating the value of what we did. In fact, I made some good deals with clients where we got paid for value, either through stock options or through performance corridors. And I created a lot of those programs. I didn't mind that at all.
And so for anybody that runs a creative marketing agency, do you have any suggestions as far as how to be successful?
Yes, I have a lot of suggestions. I'm happy to share them with you, but I'll give you a few up front. Number one, if you want to go into the creative business, get professional help. I'm not talking about the therapist or the psychiatrist that you think I'm talking about. I'm talking about a lawyer, an accountant, an investment person, an HR person, because if you're a creative person as I am, those are a lot of things you don't want to deal with, but they're critical to getting done properly. It's why I wanted to partner with Bobby early on and have him help me with the financial portion of the business. It's why I found a partner who's actually also named Roberto in his case, but Roberto was the guy who oversaw all of that. I realize how important that is. Number two, if it's not important to the client, it's not important to you. You need to take that to heart, because as creative people, we want to do the work. Remember, the work. We want to do the work. So sometimes we do it before we get paid. We do it before the client agrees on the price. We do it even though the client doesn't want to pay the price, because we want to do the work. But that's not a way to run a business. That's a great way to be an artist and live on an island and either starve or be successful. It's not a way to run a business. If it's not important to the client, it's not important to you. Number three, say to your clients, your interest follows your investment. That's why I charge upfront. I expect to be paid up front. They don't know I do it because I don't want to have to deal with the accounting. Your interest follows your investment. If you pay me, you're going to listen to me. If you don't pay me, you don't have skin in the game. You don't have to listen to me. And it's very important as a creative person that you demonstrate value. And that value comes from all your skills, your ability to write, your ability to draw, your ability to paint, your ability to code, your ability to design, all those abilities. But your client is not really a good judge of what it is you're doing. They're judging results. And so you have to demonstrate that value. And in order to do that, they have to invest in the program. And the only other thing I'll add is whenever possible, get paid up front. Because then you don't have to think about it anymore. Get paid, do the work.
So you're known in your branding message. You talk, and also in your book, which I want to ask you about, you talk about making any company, making the product offering and the message about that offering all about them. And that the goal is to make the consumer or the customer or whoever feel good about themselves. So let me just first of all introduce, this is Bruce's book, All About Them. Please tell us about the genesis of this book and the philosophy and why that's so important, and a little bit about your branding message.
Well, I think, and I learned over the years that I ran the agency, that too many creatives and too many businesses build businesses and build business models based on what they do. If you're an attorney, you open a law firm. If you're a boat mechanic, you would open a marina or a boat servicing company. If you're a baker, if you like to bake pies, you would open a bakery. Those are all based on function and the function of what you do. But the problem is, in today's world, people can find what you do in a lot of places. They don't have to buy it from you. Are the other options as good as you are? Of course not. You're the best. That's why you watch Bob's show here, and that's why you're participating with us. But your customers and your potential customers don't know that. And so if you build a business based on what you do, you're just another person who provides that technical service. However, if you turn that paradigm around and build a business based on who your customer is, and more importantly, who your customer wants to be, what their aspirations are, and how you can help them get there, all of a sudden, everything changes. Because all of a sudden, you're not selling yourself. You're selling the improvement you're going to make to their life. Bob said my tagline, a good brand makes you feel good, but a great brand makes you feel good about yourself. So the whole concept of all about them is to create a brand, your brand, that's all about your consumer, all about your customer, all about your clients, all about your community, depending on who you do business with, so that they can self-actualize, they can tell the world who they are based on the products or services they're buying from you.
And how do you get into the mind of, we all need to get into the mind of our consumer, our target market. How do you, as a marketing person who want to figure out what is it about any business that makes their customer or consumer feel good about themselves? How do you get into their mindset?
Simply put, ask them, talk to them, spend time with them. The current business that I'm most interested in doing is my speaking business. I want to get more speaking events. Well, who hires speakers? CEOs of companies and meeting planners. So when I get the opportunity to speak at an event, most of the speakers that I see there are talking to the people in the audience. They're wandering around at the cocktail party, talking to the people in the audience, trying to find out what they're talking about, what they're thinking about, because they want to know what to do up on stage, right? I don't think that's the product I offer. So I spend the time when I'm at these events talking to the CEOs, the CFOs, the COOs, and the meeting planners of the companies that hired me. And I want to understand, what is it they want to accomplish? How will they know that I did a good job? What does success look like to them? I want to know what they are concerned about. So for example, if I spend time with meeting planners, with event managers, what I find out is what they care about most is that everything works according to plan. Because they are hired to bring someone up on a stage in front of 300 or 3,000 people, and they're terrified that you're going to screw up. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to curse on stage. You're going to, I don't know, all the things you could do wrong, right? They don't really care about the function. They don't care about the message. They care that you do a good job. So from that, I've learned ways of letting them feel good about choosing me and letting them market who they are by choosing me. Now, the CEOs, the COOs, the CFOs, CMOs, chief marketing officers, they have very different concerns. They assume I'm going to do a good job because I'm a professional. And they didn't really choose me. So they're not as concerned about it. What they're concerned about is what change are we going to facilitate in their people?
Meaning on Monday morning,
Exactly.
when they go to work, what action can they take?
That's right. It's not enough to simply get up on stage and be entertaining. The entertainment helps, of course, because the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down, right? And people don't pay attention if you're not entertaining. But they want to know, when my people, to use your words, when my people go back to work on Monday, what are they going to do different? How are they going to help me and the company achieve our goals? So I show them specifically the exercises, the tools, the tips and techniques that I'm going to take them through, that I'm going to share, the stories I'm going to share, and why that's going to transform their people. Very different than what I talk to the meeting planners about. I wouldn't have known that if I hadn't spent time, talked to these folks, found out what their fears were, found out what their interests were, found out what their passions were. And by the way, whatever business you're in, you can do the same thing. Talk to the people who you do business with. More importantly, talk to the people you want to do business with and find out who they want to be. And then you figure out how can you take that information and help them get there, and then how can you communicate that?
So maybe we could do an example. Let's say that a company is a IT provider, either a cloud provider or a managed service provider or a software provider. How would they position themselves and make their customer feel good about themselves?
Well, it depends on what that customer wants. So the first thing they would do is they would talk to their customer. The simple line I use all the time was, what does success look like? When I'm done, when you're thinking about what you paid me and the amount of time you spent and the investment with your people and everything else, what is it that would say, wow, that was money well spent? We got a multiplier of value on that money.
So I'm a cloud user,
Okay.
right? Okay, so I'm a consumer of cloud service. What is it that would appeal to me? Like, I just chose because it was a client of mine, and I went with them. But if I were shopping around, AWS and Microsoft and all these, what would make me feel better about myself about being on their cloud?
So this is called peeling back the onion, because I'm going to ask you the same question. What does success look like to you? Different people have different issues. Some people say, I am all about security. I am terrified that I'm going to lose my data, so I want to know about security. I want to be able to tell my people, my customers, my client, my family, that we're secure. Other clients will say, what matters to me is that all my people around the city, around the country, around the world have equal access and can get to it. Other people will talk about, look, I'm on the road all the time. I want to know that I can pull up my information on my phone. I can pull it up on my iPad, I can pull it up on my laptop. Each different decision maker has a different need and want. So you talk to enough of them, you look for the patterns, and also that has to dovetail with what you're able to provide.
Yeah.
Because often what they want is something that you don't do so well. And then you have to figure out, is that the right client? Do I need to change what I do? But if you simply talk about function, in the case of a cloud computing company, speeds and feeds, you're going to find that only the IT guy whose job it is to check megahertz and megawatts and all of that is going to care. You need to know the emotional response that your potential customer is going to have. And you can keep asking me this question, and I'm going to keep saying the same thing, which is, okay, what is it that matters to them? And we keep peeling back the onion. My mother, who we talked about earlier, was a therapist. And one of the things that she impressed on me was that the presenting symptom is seldom the actual problem. So when somebody comes in and says, here's my problem, that's not the problem. That's the symptom. And you have to keep peeling back the, why does that bother you? Why does that happen? Blah, blah, blah. You have to use all those techniques to keep peeling back the onion until you get, it's like those Russian nesting dolls, right? You keep taking off the cap and there's a smaller one and a smaller one and a smaller one. But eventually you get to the essence, you get to the nugget. Yep. And once you know that, you build on it.
The best three-letter word in the English language is ask. A-S-K. Okay, so now I'm curious. You were in this ad business. At some point, you said to yourself, "I want to migrate out of that. I either want to, somehow, you got turned on to speaking." Who turned you on? What was the genesis of your current professional speaking business? Like you turned me on to professional speaking. Who did it for you? And then you decided, "I want to do that." And then you made a plan at some point to exit the ad business and get into professional speaking full time. What was the genesis?
Well, the story's kind of long, but I'll try to spare you. A number of years ago, I was asked. No, I wasn't asked. I asked a very famous design magazine. They did a business annual every fall, and they wrote about, I don't know, 10 design firms around the country. And I wanted to have a profile done of our company. So I wrote them this long letter about what had happened to me my second year in business. I did a bunch of work. I did the work first. I didn't get paid. The client was fast pay, slow pay, no pay. I lost all this money and almost put me out of business. And then what did I do about it? So I wrote them this long letter because I thought for a business annual, this is the kind of stuff that their readers need to know. If I had read this, maybe I wouldn't have lost all that money. The editor called me and he said, most people send us letters to get in the business annual telling us how great they are, how they made all this money, they did all this great work. You wrote us a letter basically telling us what a schmuck you are and then what you had to do to dig out of that hole. We would love to print that article. Okay, so they did. They then called me and they said, we do a business annual conference. Would you like to come speak at it? It's in Chicago. We will pay you and your wife to come. You can attend the conference and we'll give you $500. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So I said I would do it. I went and did it. I was terrified, but I enjoyed it. Apparently I got good response because the next year they asked me if I would come do it in San Francisco. And I did. I'd never been to California. And that was great. And then Washington, D.C., and then Denver. And then we were in Boston. And the keynote speaker was a design idol of mine, a guy by the name of Gordon MacKenzie. He wrote the book, Orbiting the Giant Hairball. I have it right over there on my bookshelf. It's an amazing book. And I asked the meeting planner if I could have dinner with him at the big dinner. Could I sit next to him? Because I knew her very well, right? I'd come for 5 years. She said, of course. So I'm chatting with him, and it was a great, great evening. And he's telling me about what he does, and he travels around the world, and he speaks at conferences. And I'm thinking, I get paid $500. So this guy must get paid like $1,000, right? I don't know about what's the right thing to say or whatever. So I say to him, "Hey, so what do they pay you to do this?" And he looks at me and he says, "Oh, $20,000. At which point I get like the neon loser sign on my forehead, right? Loser, loser, loser. Well, there was a woman there. Mackenzie has since passed away, but there was a woman there who's still a friend of mine. Her name is Kari Anderson. She's a great speaker. And she was doing workshops, and I had gotten to know her a little bit. So I told her this story, and she said, "Yeah, well, I'm getting paid $12,000 or $15,000. I don't remember now. What are they paying you?" Loser, loser, loser. So I thought about it. I thought, wow, I really like doing this. I'm getting good at it. I had a lot to learn, of course. It brings business to the agency because when I get up and speak, it attracts clients. And if I knew better, I'd be paid really well and I get to travel. And I love to travel. So I joined the National Speakers Association. I learned about the speaking business. And little by little, over time, took a long time, I put together quite a successful and lucrative speaking business. And now I try to recruit people because I know what a great thing it is for people who have our personalities.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So, we're at the end of our chat. Anything that you want to impart to my followers and audience and yours as well about business, life, change? Obviously, you decided to make a change, and you often tell me, about my changes and getting into the speaking business. If you want to speak more. And if you want to change, then change. Um, any other words of wisdom before we wrap up?
When I was a kid, I was really into cars and auto racing. I still love cars. And in college, I would go to Road Atlanta to watch the races. And I met a guy who was a mechanic. He had it was a Datsun at the time, not a Nissan. A Datsun, I think it was a 280Z. That he used to race. He did it on his own. And so I used to go and kind of help him out. You know, I didn't really know much about mechanics, but I was into it, so I would go help him out. And one day he's under the car on one of those little sliding boards, and he's working on the car, and a kid drives up, probably my age, maybe younger. Kid drives up in a beautiful Datsun 280Z, completely maxed out. Big wheels, lowered, different exhaust, all of that. So he pulls right up, he gets out, he walks over to us. The mechanic, the guy I was working with, he slides himself out from under the car, he looks up, and this guy goes, "Oh my God, are you a race car driver?" He goes, "Yes, I am." He says, "We have the same car. I'd love to be a race car driver. I would give anything to be a race car driver." So the guy says to him, the mechanic says, "So why aren't you a race car driver?" And he says, "Oh man, I can't afford it. It's too much money." Mechanic looks over at the really fancy car the kid has, and he says, "You know, if you sold that car, that would give you enough money probably to a race for a year or two." And the kid says, "Sell my car? Are you crazy?" At which point the driver that I was working with says, "Well, then I guess you wouldn't give anything to be a race car driver, would you?" And he slides himself back under the car and he went back to work. That really impressed me. If you want to speak more, speak more. If you want to change, change. Yes, you should plan for it. You shouldn't quit your day job. You should do these things in a rational manner. I'm not suggesting just hold your nose and jump. But if it's something you want to do it.
Do it.
Figure out how to do it and do it. Nike was right. Just do it.
Just do it. All right. Well, if you would like to have Bruce speak at your company or your industry conferences, he's a dynamic speaker. He speaks and entertains on branding and marketing and business. Reach out to him. You can reach him at bruceturkel.com. That's his website. There's plenty of contact information. Bruce Turkel, Turkel.com. And I will put that on the blurb below the video. And thanks for watching. Now you know a little bit about Bruce Turkel. So long for now.
Thanks, Bob.